Backfire with Steve Hickson on Woo FM. Call 423-624-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
Well, I was just told while we had a break that Mr. Chancey's going to have to leave a few minutes early today. He's got on his coat and tie. He's got courts he has to go to and so forth. So I'm going to play something right now for everyone to hear, and we'll get into that.
You know, this silly nonsense where everybody keeps saying he's a Muslim.
He is.
Where does that come from?
Well, Franklin, I did a little research on Mr. Obama being a Muslim, and it is hard to prove that he's not a Muslim. Okay, it is hard to prove, but I've got a few things that might help you think about it.
Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Kareem. Ramadan Kareem.
He speaks the language. That's one.
I have known Islam on 3 continents before coming to the region where it was first revealed.
You're absolutely right that John McCain has not talked about my Muslim faith.
One of the best things I heard was Ronald Reagan predicting this would happen way in advance.
Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
I've got a core set of values that I think have to be advanced.
The core set of values is dangerous.
That my individual salvation depends on our collective salvation.
And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. In this vote harvesting time, they use terms like the Great Society, or as we were told a few days ago by the President, we must accept a greater government activity in the affairs of the people.
E pluribus unum, out of many, one. In the end, that's what this election is about.
Anyway, there was a few things there that just led you to believe it. And then I found some history about Mr. Obama's mother and so forth. She was an atheist out of Kansas. She met Mr. Obama's father while going to, what school was it she was going to? I forget. Anyway, I don't have.
I believe he was at Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard. I'm sorry. And they got married, and then he was a full Muslim.
He was a Muslim.
Yeah. Then they got divorced when Mr. Obama was 2, and then she ended up. Her name was Ann Dunham, and she
ended up marrying another Muslim.
Married another Muslim who sent Barack back to school, and he did attend a Muslim school
in Indonesia, where you had to swear you were a Muslim to attend school in Indonesia. Correct. You also had to be an Indonesian citizen to attend school in Indonesia.
But Mr. Obama, in all fairness, did say he went to a Catholic school also.
For, I think, about 14 months.
But anyway, I won't get into all the details. But it does leave a little doubt in your mind that maybe he, his lifestyle.
He's certainly sympathetic to them.
Yes, he's very sympathetic to them.
Well,
now,
when you refer to Israel as an apartheid state, it kind of fits.
Well, he went to the Wahhabah school in Jakarta.
The Wahhabi sect is the sect funded by the Saudi royal family, and that is the sect that produced all of the terrorists that have attacked us all around the world. That is the Al-Qaeda sect. That is everything.
The president receives a daily devotional every day from a Christian minister and engages in prayer with him several times a week.
But Franklin,
this is offensive.
You're right. Here's the problem.
It really
with this.
is.
Reverend Wright
is
is
really
labeled. Reverend Wright is labeled a Christian minister.
So what?
That doesn't mean it's a good message.
So what? It's still Christian, John.
Franklin,
this is offensive.
Those are facts. You're saying the facts are offensive?
It's offensive for us to sit around and try to question the man's faith.
It's offensive to discuss his actual personal history.
No, it's offensive because the purpose in doing it is ugly and
Franklin, the fact is the fact. Whatever purpose people derive from it, a fact is a fact.
Well, how come you don't want to talk about those other facts, though?
What other facts?
Well,
about him
I didn't know the IRS was targeting
consistently
the
saying
conservative group.
that he's a Christian.
Well, why
don't you talk
Franklin,
about that?
He didn't attend the National Day of Prayer until this year.
Why did he cancel the National Day of Prayer?
But he did have a Muslim
Well, what
day of
happened?
prayer.
It didn't happen this year. It didn't happen.
Yes, he did.
No,
The
he canceled
congressional Republicans do it. He doesn't attend.
it. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. He doesn't attend. But there was a National Muslim Day of Prayer.
He had an event at the White House for celebrating the Muslims, Islam.
And he took his shoes off and got down.
I don't know. He had an event.
Did he, Franklin? I don't know.
No, he also had the Jewish members of our society there. Those aren't Christians.
Franklin, the longest attendance in a Christian church he had was Reverend Wright, and I'll be glad to play any of his sermons for you, and you see if you like them. You see if you find that sermon acceptable in any Christian church in our community. Now, I'm not judging him at all.
Oh,
I'm just
yes,
putting,
you
Franklin,
are.
I'm putting
That's
a fact
exactly
out.
what
you know,
you're
you all,
doing.
the liberals have a problem with facts, Franklin. That's your problem.
What
When
I
a
have-
fact doesn't agree with
what
what
I
you
have a
convince
problem
people,
with is
you get
character
upset.
assassination.
Franklin, all we did was list facts.
Hey, Franklin, you didn't build that law office you got either.
That's right, I didn't.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you a question, Franklin. There are two video
Who did
clips.
this?
There are two video clips showing his mother and his grandmother and his aunt talking about his birth in Kenya. Now, let me preface this by saying I don't think he was born in Kenya, but there's two video clips where two family relatives, a grandmother and an aunt, talk about it. If I play those videos for people, is that character assassination? I didn't create them. I didn't put a gun to those women's head, 10, 12 years ago and tell them to go on video and say these things. But I think it's a relative fact for people to go, gosh, why'd they say that?
No comment. Anyway,
One little thing, because I do have to run.
okay.
Tomorrow's the last day for early voting, folks.
It
Public
is.
service.
And folks, the totals are not as high as they've been in the past. They're pretty good in Bradley, but they could be much better.
Yeah.
Well,
it's unfortunate that even in really good years, 25, 30% of
how many
the
people?
registered voters
How many
come out
people?
and vote.
How
so.
many people do we have running totally? About 60.
No, you've got over, if you count all the judges and everything, I guess you've got up over 90 or something.
How many are Democrats running in this?
About 4.
4
I don't know, 4 or 5, something like that.
In this particular primary.
in this primary.
Yeah,
But
they're,
folks,
they're
this
not, they're
primary,
not opposed, though.
this
They're not
primary
opposed,
will
though.
determine a lot of things.
Yeah.
The judge's race, the DA's race. There's no Democrat qualified.
right.
So if you want to have a voice in who's
The sheriff's
elected,
race.
the sheriff's race,
a lot of
you've
them.
got to go
Yeah.
this time to vote.
When the
Anyway,
when-
tomorrow is the last day of early voting.
That's
Is that
right.
correct?
And folks, my kids say I'm too dramatic on this, but when you think about the Iraqi citizens braving bombs, braving snipers, and holding that purple dipped finger up at 70% at one point, or close to 80%, and we can't muster more than 25-30% to the polls, that's sad.
Now, see, there is something that John and I can agree on.
I agree. You leaving us?
I got to.
All right.
Enjoy.
Hey, bye-bye.
They're saying that applause was not for Franklin leaving. It just happened that way.
Bye, Franklin. Go ahead and open up the phone lines if anybody wants to call us right now. 614-5553. John, what do you think about the NBA basketball situation going on?
Well, it's complicated because nobody should have been surprised at this guy's views. This guy has been sued for racial discrimination multiple times. The sad thing, and I'm sure I'll get fussed at for even bringing this up, but for example, the Wall Street Journal editor, and the editor that wrote this is a black man, is blasting the NAACP. Because they've been taking Sterling's money for years. Matter of fact, he was on the program, I saw the print up for it, to receive his second NAACP Lifetime Achievement Award.
Do you think they'll still give it to him?
Well, I'm sure they'll still take it. Of course, the Wall Street Journal editor, what his point is, they don't care about who he is. They only want the money. As long as he was giving them money, they were willing to take his money. One of the most interesting commentaries on it has been Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's. Now, he says, look, he's a sleazeball. I don't like him. He's a racist, but we've all known he was a racist. Why are we doing it now? And he talks about the fact that the girl basically leads him around this conversation to get him to say these things. And Jabbar makes some really interesting comments. He said, didn't we just call to task the NSA for intruding into American citizens' privacy in such an un-American way? And he also referenced Mitt Romney's embarrassing 47% remark that was recorded secretly. He said, now this is Jabbar saying this, the making and release of this tape is so sleazy that just listening to it makes me feel like an accomplice to the crime, Abdul-Jabbar fumed. We didn't steal the cake, but we're all gorging ourselves on it. So his point is the hypocrisy of us being indignant about this. The guy's apparently been a known racist for years.
He just had a lot of money and could buy a basketball team.
And I think that's Jabbar's point. You know, the money shouldn't make a difference on this, but he's also bothered by the invasion of privacy.
You know, this guy, they say he's got enough money that they came out and made this decision so quick, the NBA did, that this guy could give them a hard time
Well, I have a problem with, look, the fans can decide this. The fans had already started dropping ticket sales. You know, the market can fix things like this.
Right.
And this impulse to always have the heavy hand of some organization, that concerns me. Jabbar's closing comments are actually pretty good. He says, if we're all going to be outraged, let's be outraged that we weren't more outraged when his racism was first evident. Let's be outraged that private conversations between people in an intimate relationship are recorded and publicly played. Let's be outraged over whoever did the betraying will probably get a book deal, a sitcom, trade recipes, and with Hoda and Kathy Lee, and soon appear on Celebrity Apprentice and Dancing with the Stars. I think look up Jabbar's comments. It's actually a pretty good commentary on our culture as a general thing.
What do you think about President Obama making a speech about it from Malaysia?
Well, the Wall Street Journal guy actually comments on that. He said, look, I'll read it. It said, I thought what he said was fine. If people are looking to this president for racial unity, I think they should look elsewhere. This is a man who a couple of weeks ago was up in Harlem with the aforementioned Al Sharpton. When you pal around with Al Sharpton, you are not into racial unity. That's Wall Street Journal editorial. You know, that's amazing that that liberal paper could say something that derogatory. That's something Franklin won't do. Well, this editor he's an interesting guy. He's a conservative, a black conservative, which means he's one of the most hated men in America. Yeah. But he's an interesting editor. We got a call. Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
No, Bo, I just have a question.
Go ahead, darling.
In our sheriff's race, do we have a Democrat?
No.
They're both Republicans.
They claim to be. In what? Sheriff's race. Oh, yeah.
Do we have any Democrats running?
There's some county commission Democrats, and Amy Reed will be on the ballot for judge in August. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know.
So you'll have, depending on what commission district you're in, there will be some contested races. The 3rd district has Jeff Morlock has been the only elected Democrat in the county for the last little bit.
So this is just a Republican thing up here, huh?
Well, it's not just a Republican thing. The Democrat Party wasn't able to put forward, I guess, any credible candidates. It has nothing to do with us. They had as much chance as the Republicans did. They just couldn't put anybody forward. Red, you should have run for something.
Do what?
You should have ran something.
Well, I think John should run.
He's a Republican. I can't afford to. I got to work. That's one. I will tell you. That's one of the problems with our government. I think Congress. Dan Rawls talked about this one time about making Congress in the age of the internet. Why couldn't they meet online? Yeah. If I think Congress, personally, I think the way Tennessee does their legislature works pretty well. It is part-time. I think if the national Congress, the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House could be a part-time job, and these people were forced to earn their living back home the way the rest of us do, I think it would change the way they govern.
You know what I'd like to see?
What's that?
Everybody thrown out of Washington. No Democrats, no Republicans. People just run without being a Democrat or Republican and see what we come up with.
Well, I mean, they'll segregate down. I understand, Red. The problem is what the parties do for you, and I know a lot. It's easy to blame the parties, but what the parties do, on average, a Republican, on average, will favor less government, less taxes, and on average, the Democrats favor more government and more tax. If you have more government, you have to have more taxes. So Republicans are more, leave us alone, let us do what we think is right. Democrats are more, you don't understand what's right. You need a big bureaucracy to tell you what's right.
Okay. I'm trying to figure this all out here.
I understand.
I'd read.
Bye.
Bye.
Now, I tell you where it gets messy, Red, is in Bradley County, for example. The current kind of thought among the Democrat Party is you need to be a Republican to get elected, so everybody becomes a Republican, whether they actually are or not. I personally am a very conservative Republican, and it frustrates me when someone with the name Republican votes for bigger government, votes for bigger taxes, votes for more government control. And that's what you run into. But there are parts of the country, California, for example, you got to be a Democrat to run out there.
Well, it's pretty well known that some of the Republicans around here are kind of under the Democratic flag, but running as Republicans.
Well, everybody's Republican in Bradley County, whether they are or not. You know, that's just, and that's been one of the frustrations, and that's been partly
Why do you think our area is more Republican than, let's say, Nashville?
Well, let me give some perspective to that. If you go back 25 years, the Democrats held all the offices in Bradley County.
Right.
You go back into the 70s and early 80s, Republicans were a struggling party. It ebbs and flows. I will say that this part of the country, at this point, at least in the near future, will probably remain Republican simply because the Republican Party is the more conservative party. The culture of this part of the country is a Scotch-Irish culture. It's a Celtic culture. And it's a individualistic, leave me alone, let me do my own thing type of culture, which is really what made America great. And right now, at least, that'll probably stay. One of the discussions in the Chattanooga area was with VW coming in. They were bringing a lot of workers in from up north, a lot of workers from Europe and Germany. That will shift the political culture in that area. Mm-hmm. So, who knows what the future will have.
Yeah. And then we have Wacker coming up here, it's German.
Same type of thing. As you bring people in from the outside, they bring their viewpoints. Now, sometimes they migrate. You'd be amazed how many people from Michigan, Ohio, that move here partly because of our conservatives. They want to be in this part of the country.
John, our monument was run over this week down in front of your house.
That was pretty sad.
Yeah, it was. I saw where the city and the county looked like, the city voted to work with the county to put the monument back.
Well, wouldn't the insurance company of the offending driver be responsible to pay for that?
I would think so.
Now, one of the comments that I made and several people made was, boy, I'd hate to be that insurance company. You're talking about over 100-year-old piece of granite that you need to replace.
Yeah.
My son saw them out there, and they tried to set it back up. They brought the crane out when it was on top of the car.
Uh-huh.
And he said they tried to set it back up, and it just, it's broken in about 4 pieces.
Well, that's been there a long time. It's a big part of the history of Cleveland. So I hope that it'll be done right when it's done, and not
I hope so.
Some makeshift thing with some somebody down there spreading some mortar or something and just sticking it together.
Well, Lisa's grandfather, Vaughn Hamilton, Vaughn lived there for years, and somebody had stolen the bayonet off of the war monument that's right in front of that.
Yeah.
And Vaughn, before he passed away, was able, and Bobby Taylor, I think, was active in that. They were able to get that restored and have a new bayonet made and placed back on that. And I know that he, as an older man, had grown up with that monument his entire life. He was very happy to see that restored properly. Mm-hmm. And I hope this one will be restored properly.
Well, I think we ought to do one more monument there while we're replacing monuments, do a new one and honor it under the legend of Paul Betsy.
We might have to have a vote on that. See whether everybody agrees.
She oversees the sitting area in the downtown.
Okay. We'll see.
Hold on a minute. John, we were talking about the city council passing the budget this morning briefly. And, basically they passed a budget with no tax increase, but with a little more money. And also, one of the things I was reading about, I was trying to find my notes here. It included 22 separate funds. The separate funds is what I don't understand, and maybe we ought to get somebody in here to tell us what separate. I would say separate funds are Cleveland Utilities.
I think so. I will tell you that these budgets, for example, several years ago, I actually had to fuss and fight to get a copy of the schools budget, the Cleveland City Schools. And even after I got it, you couldn't read it and follow anything in it. And I personally think that they do that on purpose. They don't want the public to be able to follow these things easily. I think there should be some regulation on them that, look, you've got to give us some bar graphs, you've got to give us some charts where we can actually look at this and compare year to year. So that's part of it. It is a complicated procedure, I understand that, but I think that there's a vested interest in making sure it remains complicated.
We got the Matador in here live on TV.
I will tell you, the local builders, it's amazing how all this stuff interconnects. The local builders are now having to do new inspections and things because of the Dodd-Frank, the federal law. The Obama administration has now apparently tied all of the local grants to forcing the local cities to enact new building codes. And so the city, if it wants to continue getting its federal money, has to make the builders do these new inspections, these new codes, which of course everything costs more money, which means the houses are going to cost more. FEMA has now notified people living on the creeks and rivers, and apparently in their notification they state, we mismanaged our flood funds. So you now have to pay an adjuster or a appraiser to come out, reappraise your property, and we're going to raise your flood taxes to cover our own mismanagement of the flood tax fund.
Now, how can they do that?
Because they're the federal government, and they can do whatever they want.
Why wouldn't they use the tax appraisals that are on the current properties?
Well, because the tax appraisals won't be high enough for them, I'm sure. Dodd-Frank is very specific on tax appraisals. That's one of the things that's been killing the building industry. They came in and put all these rules in place of what you could appraise and what you couldn't. You can take a 200-year-old home built out of solid limestone, and it won't appraise any differently from a 10-year-old home because it's based on how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms. So you look at it and you go, now this is a hand-hewn limestone home, but I'm only going to appraise it based on the bedrooms and bathrooms.
I guess it's amazing to me how FEMA is going to make the individual landowners get an appraisal. Now, I know a few years ago, if you were doing any refinancing on your property, I mean, even if you weren't in the flood zone, some of the banks on commercial property was requiring you to buy flood insurance.
Well, the flood insurance program is a ridiculous sham as well.
I think the banks own it, don't they?
You know, John Stossel's talked about this, and he's got a multi-million-dollar home up there off the New Jersey coast. The taxpayer have rebuilt his home. And he said, I should be ashamed to have taken the taxpayer dollars to rebuild my home after a hurricane. But you know what? The government was giving it. And he said, I'm paying my taxes for that. If you build a home on the coast, guarantee it's going to at some point get hit by a hurricane. Why am I, living in Cleveland, Tennessee, forced to pay taxes to rebuild your home that you chose to build in a dangerous, flood-prone, hurricane-prone area? And then it gets all convoluted. The global warming people, one of the statistics they've used is that the monetary damage from storms has increased. That has nothing to do with there being more storms. What it has to do with is more dummies are building homes right out on the edge of the sand where the hurricane blows the homes down.
Well, I know I've got a friend that's got a place down in Florida, and he told me his insurance came in, and he now's got a policy that says it will not cover any damage caused by wind-driven rains.
Well, that's probably a private policy. He can still probably get the FEMA policy. But my point is, the FEMA policy is subsidized by all of us. Why am I living inland in Tennessee having to subsidize someone's $5 million home sitting down in Destin, Florida?
Because they can.
Well, that's government. The more power you give government, the more they screw us.
Well, it's been a little quiet around here without Franklin in the studio. So, hey, Franklin, if you're listening, John and I are getting a little bored here. It's just not as exciting around here without you. So hold on just a second. Hold on a minute. I've got one last thing before we leave.
Oh, by the way, polar bears are now threatened again with their existence. Do you know what's threatening their existence now?
Santa Claus?
No, this
What?
is serious. Their existence is being threatened now because the polar ice is too thick. Now, Al Gore told us they were drowning in 2006.
It's too thin.
Now the ice is too thick and is actually threatening their existence.
They can't get
Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Kareem. Ramadan Kareem.
Bye-bye. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.
A veteran of the United States Air Force, Charles Dunson is seeking political office to be a helpmate to the Bradley County Sheriff's Office and the legal community. If elected as constable, he is committed to protecting the welfare of his constituents and provide a voice for the less fortunate and homebound. In addition to serving documents for the legal and law enforcement communities, Mr. Dunson's goal as constable is to be a visible and